The small town of Brookfield was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and families that had lived there for generations. Among those families was the Khans, respected for their honesty and hard work. At the center of the family was Daniel, a bright young man in his early 20s. Hard-working, kind, and ambitious, he was admired by everyone. His teachers praised him, his friends trusted him, and the community saw him as a future leader. Daniel's dream was simple: build a successful career, take care of his widowed mother, and bring honor to his family name. But there was one man Daniel trusted above all others: his uncle Richard. To Daniel, Richard was more than an uncle. He was a second father. Whenever Daniel needed advice, Richard was there. Whenever Daniel had a success to share, Richard was the first to hear it. Daniel often said, "If Dad were alive, he'd be proud of me. But since he's not, I'll make Uncle Richard proud instead." Yet behind Richard's warm smile and kind words, a different story existed. He was a man driven by envy. Every time he saw Daniel's determination, every time neighbors praised his nephew, a bitter fire burned inside him. Richard had once dreamed of success himself, but life had left him stuck in an average job, limited respect, and a constant reminder of his own failures. Daniel's rising star was a mirror reflecting his own wasted potential. Richard never showed his bitterness openly. Instead, he clapped Daniel on the back, saying, "You're going places, son. Just remember, family always comes first." Daniel, innocent and trusting, believed every word. Late at night, though, Richard would sit in his study, swirling a glass of whiskey, whispering to himself, "Everyone already sees him as the golden boy. If I let this continue, he'll outshine me completely. No, I can't let that happen." Thus began the quiet rivalry Daniel never saw coming. While he dreamed of a brighter tomorrow, his uncle was already planning in the shadows, ready to turn admiration into doubt and trust into betrayal. The bond that Daniel cherished so deeply was about to become his greatest weakness. Daniel's life was shining brighter each day. He had just secured an internship at a prestigious firm in the city, an opportunity that promised to change his future forever. His neighbors congratulated him. His mother beamed with pride, and even his uncle Richard smiled warmly, patting him on the back. But inside, Richard's envy only grew. "The whole town talks about him as if he's a hero," Richard thought bitterly. "They forget who kept this family standing all these years, me. If Daniel succeeds, I'll be nothing but a shadow." Richard's plan began small, just whispers, carefully placed doubts that would chip away at Daniel's reputation. At a community dinner, Richard casually remarked, "Daniel's ambitious, no doubt, but you know how young men are. Sometimes ambition makes them careless." At first, no one took the words seriously. Daniel was too well liked, but Richard was patient. Like poison in water, he spread his lies slowly, knowing it would take time for the damage to show. He began forging small stories saying Daniel had mishandled money at a fundraiser, hinting that Daniel skipped responsibilities to chase city dreams, even suggesting that Daniel looked down on the simple life of their town. Each lie was framed as concern rather than accusation, making Richard appear like a protective elder. Behind closed doors, Daniel had no idea. He trusted Richard completely. One evening, he shared his excitement with him. "Uncle, I want to do something big, not just for myself, but for Mom, for our family. I want to make our name proud." Richard nodded, masking the storm within him. "Of course, son. Just remember, pride can make enemies. Be careful." The words struck Daniel as fatherly advice, but they were a veiled warning. Richard was already setting the stage, pulling strings in silence. He knew that once suspicion entered people's minds, it would grow like wildfire. And soon, the perfect opportunity would come, an opening to turn whispers into accusations, admiration into doubt. While Daniel dreamed of success, his uncle was quietly sharpening the knife of betrayal. It started with small shifts so subtle Daniel barely noticed them at first. A neighbor who once greeted him warmly now avoided his eyes. A childhood friend who used to laugh with him suddenly grew distant. Even at the community center, whispers seemed to follow him like shadows. Daniel shrugged it off, convincing himself it was his imagination. Maybe people are just busy, he told his mother with a smile, though deep down, unease lingered. But the whispers soon turned into rumors. Someone claimed Daniel had mishandled donations during a charity drive. Another insisted he mocked the very town that raised him, calling its people small-minded. The lies spread like wildfire, each one feeding the next until Daniel's once glowing reputation began to dim. The most painful moment came when his internship letter mysteriously disappeared before it could reach him. The firm never received his confirmation, and the position was given to someone else. Daniel was devastated. He searched everywhere for the missing letter, unaware that Richard had intercepted it, burning it quietly in his fireplace while wearing a thin smile. "Strange," Richard said one evening, feigning concern. "Sometimes opportunities slip away. Maybe it wasn't meant to be, son." Daniel nodded silently, his chest heavy with disappointment. He had worked tirelessly for that chance, and now it was gone. Soon, even his closest allies began to doubt him. The town elders, who once praised him as a future leader, now looked at him with suspicion. "He seems distracted," one murmured. "Maybe the boy isn't as trustworthy as we thought," another added. Daniel's mother noticed the change, too. She saw her son sitting in silence, staring at the floor, his once bright eyes dulled with confusion. "Daniel, talk to me," she urged. But how could he explain something he didn't understand himself? He had done nothing wrong, yet his world was crumbling. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard watched from the sidelines, his plan unfolding exactly as intended. Each lie, each stolen chance, brought Daniel lower while raising Richard higher in the eyes of the community. For the first time in his life, Daniel began to feel truly alone, and that loneliness was the very trap Richard had been waiting for. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's life felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. He still carried himself with quiet dignity, but the world around him had changed. Invitations to gatherings stopped arriving. Friends no longer asked him for advice. Even at the local cafe, he noticed the hushed tones whenever he entered, followed by silence until he left. At first, Daniel tried to push through with patience. Truth always wins, he told himself. But patience turned into frustration, and frustration soon into doubt. Why is this happening to me? Who is behind it? One evening, he overheard two men at the marketplace whispering. "They say Richard warned the elders about Daniel. Apparently, he's not the man we thought he was." The words froze Daniel in place. His heart pounded as if the ground had slipped from beneath him. Uncle Richard? The thought felt impossible. This was the man he trusted more than anyone else. The man who held his secrets, his dreams, his fears. Could it be true? That night, Daniel sat alone in his room, staring at the family photo on his desk. His father's smiling face looked back at him, and beside it, Uncle Richard's familiar grin. He clenched his fists. If he really did this. His voice cracked, the weight of betrayal too heavy to bear. He confronted Richard the next morning, though cautiously. "Uncle, people are saying strange things. They say you've been warning others about me. Is it true?" Richard's expression was calm, almost amused. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Son, people gossip. I've only ever tried to protect you. If I spoke to the elders, it was because I care. Ambition is dangerous, Daniel. I don't want you to burn too bright and lose yourself." The words were gentle, but Daniel felt the chill beneath them. For the first time, he saw something in Richard's eyes that wasn't love, it was calculation. That realization cut deeper than any rumor. To be betrayed by strangers was painful, but to be betrayed by the man he considered a father, that was unbearable. Daniel knew one thing. If Richard was truly behind his downfall, he would find out. And when he did, the truth would not stay hidden forever. Daniel spent nights lying awake, replaying every memory of his uncle. The laughter, the advice, the promises all poisoned now by the possibility of deceit. For days, anger consumed him, but beneath that anger a fire began to spark. One evening, while walking through the quiet streets of Brookfield, Daniel stopped at the small community library. He sat there for hours, surrounded by silence and books, reminding himself who he was, a man of discipline, honesty, and perseverance. He whispered to himself, if he wants to destroy me with lies, then I'll fight back with truth. Daniel started small. He volunteered at the community shelter, working late into the night. He repaired broken fences for elderly neighbors, helped children with schoolwork, and quietly rebuilt his reputation through actions rather than words. People who had doubted him began to notice the sincerity in his eyes again. Meanwhile, Richard watched with growing unease. Each good deed Daniel performed threatened to undo weeks of carefully planted lies. One evening, while sipping whiskey in his dimly lit study, Richard muttered, "He's tougher than I thought, but no matter. I'll strike harder." But Daniel wasn't the same trusting boy anymore. He began keeping records of his work, gathering receipts, letters, and testimonies. He wrote down every rumor he heard and traced it back to its source. Slowly, a pattern emerged, and at the center of that web was always Richard. His mother noticed the change in him too. "You've grown stronger, Daniel," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Your father would have been proud." Daniel smiled faintly. "I have to be strong, Mom, not just for myself, but for us, for our name." The more Richard tried to break him, the more determined Daniel became. Each setback was fuel, each whisper of doubt another reason to rise. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just surviving, he was preparing for the moment when truth would no longer hide in the shadows, but stand in the open light for everyone to see. Daniel had learned the hardest lesson of his life. Trust could be a weapon in the wrong hands. But instead of letting the betrayal destroy him, he decided to turn it into strength. He began watching Richard closely. Every word, every meeting, every late-night phone call, Daniel noticed it all. He realized that Richard wasn't just spreading rumors. He was manipulating documents, twisting stories, and even bribing certain townspeople to back his lies. One evening, Daniel approached his old friend Michael, a tech-savvy classmate who worked part-time at the town's newspaper. "I need your help," Daniel said quietly, not to fight him with fists, but with proof. Michael agreed, and together they started digging. They found discrepancies in the fundraiser, records numbers Richard himself had handled. They uncovered letters Richard had written to the elders, warning them about Daniel's reckless ambition. Michael even traced phone records, showing late-night calls Richard made right before each. Rumors surfaced, the puzzle pieces began to align, and the picture was clear. Richard was the mastermind behind it all. Still, Daniel knew evidence alone wasn't enough. People needed to see the truth with their own eyes. He began planning carefully, waiting for the right moment, a community gathering where the entire town, including the elders, would be present. Meanwhile, Richard remained confident, unaware of the trap closing around him. One night, he chuckled over dinner with a friend. "The boy's spirit is broken. Soon, no one will even remember his name." But Daniel, sitting silently in his room, whispered to himself, "You're wrong, Uncle. My name will rise again. And this time it will be because the truth is stronger than your lies." By the time the town's annual festival was announced, Daniel was ready. His evidence was in order, witnesses prepared, and his resolve stronger than ever. The stage was set. The hunter would soon become the hunted. The town's annual festival had always been a celebration of unity, a time when families gathered, children played in the streets, and elders blessed the younger generation. This year, however, the air carried a strange tension. Daniel could feel eyes on him, some still clouded with suspicion, others quietly sympathetic. As the evening progressed, the community gathered in the town hall, where speeches were given and leaders honored. Richard, dressed sharply in a dark suit, stood near the front. He looked every bit the respected elder, nodding as neighbors greeted him warmly. His confidence was unshaken. Then came Daniel's turn to speak. He stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "For months I've heard the whispers," he began, scanning the crowd. "I felt the doubt in your eyes. But tonight I will not defend myself with words alone. Tonight I will show you the truth." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Richard's smile faltered for the first time. Daniel signaled to Michael, who set up a projector. On the screen appeared copies of fundraiser records numbers, altered by Richard's own handwriting. Gasps echoed through the room. Next came the letters Richard had written to the elders, warning them of Daniel's so-called arrogance. Finally, audio clips played of phone calls. Richard's voice unmistakable, planting rumors that had nearly destroyed his nephew. The room fell into stunned silence. Richard's face turned pale, his polished mask cracking before everyone's eyes. Daniel's voice broke the silence. I loved my uncle. I trusted him as a father. But that trust was used to betray not only me, but all of you. Lies were spread, respect was stolen, and for what? Jealousy? He turned to Richard directly, his eyes burning. You tried to take my future, uncle, but you cannot take the truth. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, shame flickering in their eyes for believing Richard's lies. Neighbors whispered angrily, their gazes shifting from Daniel to Richard with disgust. Richard tried to speak, his voice trembling. This is nonsense. Forged lies. But the evidence was undeniable. His words only deepened the crowd's anger. For the first time, Daniel stood taller than Richard not because of ambition, but because of truth. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted forever. The town hall buzzed with outrage. People who once doubted Daniel now turned on Richard with disbelief and anger. An elder, his voice trembling with disappointment, spoke first. Richard, we trusted you as a guide, as a man of wisdom. Yet you poisoned our hearts against your own blood. How could you? Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. His polished confidence had shattered. He looked smaller, weaker, like a man cornered by his own sins. Daniel stood silently, not triumphant but resolute. He hadn't fought this battle to humiliate Richard, he had fought it to reclaim the truth. Still, the sight of his uncle's downfall stung. This was the man who once told him bedtime stories, who once promised to protect him. Now he was exposed as the very enemy who nearly ruined his life. Daniel's mother stepped forward, her eyes wet with pride and sorrow. She placed a hand on her son's shoulder. The truth was never lost, Daniel. It was only waiting for the right moment to shine. The elders gathered, and one by one, they approached Daniel. We were wrong, they admitted. We let doubt blind us. Your actions, your honesty speak louder than any rumor. Neighbors who had once avoided him now came forward with apologies. Old friends clasped his hand, some with tears in their eyes. Respect, once stolen, now returned in abundance. As for Richard, he could not face their condemnation. He left the hall in silence, his head bowed, the sound of angry whispers following him like chains. He was no longer the wise uncle, no longer the respected elder. He was a man stripped of honor, abandoned by the very community he had manipulated. Daniel, however, stood in the center of the hall, not as a victim, but as a survivor. His name was restored, his dignity intact, and his bond with the town stronger than ever. That night, as fireworks lit up the festival sky, Daniel whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning. My future will not be built on lies or betrayal, but on truth, integrity, and resilience." And for the first time in months, he felt free. The days after the festival were different. Brookfield seemed brighter, lighter, as if the heavy cloud of lies had finally lifted. People greeted Daniel with genuine warmth, and for the first time in a long while, he felt seen not as a rumor but as himself. But even in victory, his heart carried a heaviness. Betrayal by strangers was one thing, but betrayal by blood cut deeper than any wound. Late one evening, Daniel sat on the porch of his home, staring at the stars. His mother joined him, her presence calm and steady. "You look troubled, my son," she said gently. Daniel sighed. "I won. Mom, I proved the truth. But why does it still hurt?" His mother smiled sadly. "Because love never disappears, even when it is betrayed. Richard was your uncle, your father's brother. Part of you will always grieve for what he could have been." Daniel nodded, her words sinking into him like truth carved in stone. "Do you think he'll ever change?" She was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Some men learn when they lose everything. Others never do. That's not your burden to carry." Her words gave Daniel peace. He realized then that revenge hadn't truly healed him. It was the act of standing for the truth. of refusing to let lies define him that gave him strength. Weeks later, Daniel visited his father's grave. He knelt beside the headstone, his voice low but steady. "Dad, I kept our name safe. I almost lost myself, but I didn't. I hope I've made you proud." A soft breeze rustled the trees, and in that silence, Daniel felt something he hadn't in months' closure. As he stood and walked away, he carried not just his restored respect, but a lesson etched forever into his soul. Betrayal can break you, but truth has the power to rebuild you stronger. The chapter of deceit was over. Ahead lay a future Daniel would write with his own hands, honest, fearless, and uncheckable. And this time, no secret, no betrayal could ever take it away.